A man stands alone at the bottom of a trench in northwest Anatolia. In his hand, a knife. From the wall of earth in front of him, gold begins to emerge. He believes he has found the city of Homer. He is wrong about the gold. He is right about the city. There is a hill in northwest Anatolia. From the outside, it looks like any other rise above the wheat. Inside it sit 9 cities, one stacked on top of the next, like rings in the trunk of a cut tree. Above the hill, for 3,000 years, a poem. In 1873, A Man with a Knife. The poem was the Iliad. It had been recited, copied, translated, argued over, dismissed, and recited again for almost 3 millennia. For most of that time, no one knew where the city of the poem had been. For the last century before our story begins, most European scholars had decided the city had never existed at all, that Homer's Troy was literature, not place. The man with the knife was a German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann. In late May of 1873, in a trench cut into the southwest corner of that hill, he pulled almost 9,000 objects of gold, silver, and bronze from the wall of earth in front of him. He called what he found Priam's treasure. He posed his Greek wife in the diadems for a photograph that traveled the world. He told a story about her being there beside him when he found it. The treasure was real. The dating was wrong by 1,000 years. The wife was in Athens. And the man who had identified the hill as Troy before Schliemann ever set foot on it was a British diplomat named Frank Calvert, who would die almost forgotten while Schliemann was buried in Athens under a tomb inscribed to the hero Schliemann. This is the story of the Trojan thread, of a city the academic world had erased from history, and of the amateurs and diplomats and patient archaeologists who put it back, sometimes for the right reasons and sometimes for the wrong ones, sometimes by careful work and sometimes by destroying the very thing they were trying to save. 3 questions hold the video together. Did the Iliad preserve memory or only invention? Why is the name we remember from Hisarlık the wrong one? And what happens to history when the man who finds it is more interested in himself than in what he found? Witness the long thread. A shepherd is walking his flock across the plain at the end of a long summer day. He is somewhere in his 30s. He speaks a language related to Luwian, the tongue of the cities to the south and east. He has no name in the record because no one wrote his name down. To his left, the hill rises in the late light. He has known the hill all his life. The walls at the top are limestone, pale in the day, gold in this hour. Above the walls, a citadel where the rich men live and where the king of the city receives messengers who come from far away. He has never been inside the citadel. He sleeps in the lower town, the wider settlement of small houses outside the walls, where most of the people of the city live. The wind comes constantly from the north. The sailors who put in at the bay below the hill say this wind pushes their ships into the strait without effort, but holds them back when they want to leave. He has heard them complain about it in the markets. He has heard them describe the bronze and the tin and the horses they exchange for grain and wool and pottery and salt. The city is called Wilusa. 3 centuries later, when the language he speaks is dead and the citadel is buried, a poet who has never seen this hill will sing of a city in this place under a different name. He will call it Ilion. The walls will be the same walls. To the north, beyond the plain, the strait opens. Asia ends here. Europe begins on the far shore, close enough to see. The hill controls the strait, and the strait controls the trade between the Black Sea and the Aegean, and between the lands east of the mountains and the lands west of them. This is why there is a city on the hill. This is why there has been a city on this hill for almost 2,000 years already, and why there will be one for centuries more. The shepherd does not know any of this. He knows the wind, the grass, the route home before dark, the names of his goats. He knows that the rich men in the citadel are at peace this year with the great king in the east, whose city lies many days' ride inland, and that the merchants from the islands have been coming all spring. He knows the city is safe. This is around 1300 BC. The city will be safe for another 120 years. Almost 1,000 years earlier, in the same place, a man sits cross-legged in a narrow room cut into the southwest corner of a citadel that does not yet have any of the names history will give it. Light comes through a single high opening in the limestone wall. In front of him, on an oak block, a thin sheet of gold the width of his palm. He holds a polished stone hammer in his right hand. He works the sheet with short, careful blows. Beside him, on a wool-lined basket, lie the pieces he has already finished: a diadem of small gold leaves linked by chain, a pair of earrings with hanging baskets, a coiled bracelet. The fire in the small brazier at his knee keeps the gold soft. Between blows, he holds the sheet over the coals to warm it again. The room smells of charcoal and metal and his own sweat. He is making jewelry for someone in the citadel above. He does not know for whom. He works to order through an intermediary who pays him in barley and oil and copper. He has been doing this for 20 years. The city around him is Troy too. In the numbering archaeologists will use 4,500 years from now. It is a place of stone walls and monumental gates, of palace storerooms and pottery workshops, of merchants who come from the islands to trade for the metals that flow through this hill from the interior of Anatolia and from the steppes around the Black Sea. The goldsmith works in one of the most concentrated wealth zones of the early Bronze Age world. When he finishes the set he is making today, it will be carried up the slope into the citadel. It may be worn at a feast. It may be buried with the wearer. It may be hidden when the city is attacked and forgotten when the attack is survived or not survived. What will happen, in fact, is this. Sometime in the next 2 centuries, before 2300 BC, the room he is sitting in will be destroyed by fire. The gold he has just finished hammering will be packed into a small store, perhaps hastily, perhaps not. It will be sealed under collapsed walls. It will lie there in the dark for 4,400 years. In May of 1873, a man with a knife will pull it out. He will tell the world that it belonged to a king named Priam, who, when this gold was new, had not yet been imagined. A Mycenaean merchant steps off the beach at Beshica Bay on a morning in early summer around 1400 BC. He has been at sea for 2 days. The skin under his eyes is tight with salt. In his right hand, a leather bag of copper samples from Cyprus. On the beach behind him, his crew is unloading ingots from the hold. He speaks an early form of Greek. A local interpreter meets him on the sand and walks him the short distance from the bay up to the southwest gate of the citadel. As he climbs the path, the wind comes up from the strait behind him. He can smell horses already, even before he sees them. The city is famous for its horses. The Greeks who come here trade with men they call hippodamoi, horse tamers. It is the epithet they will keep using long after this trade has ended, long after the city itself is gone. 600 years from now, when an old poet on an island somewhere east of here sings a long poem about a war for this city, the Trojans in his song will still be the horse tamers. The detail will outlive everyone in it. This is Troy 6, the grandest of the 9 cities of the hill, fortified with sloping limestone walls almost 5 meters thick at the base, with a lower town that extends well beyond the citadel, much further than anyone will guess until the late 20th century, when geophysical survey finally maps it. 20 or 30,000 people may live within sight of the walls. The merchant will close his deal by midday and sail out 2 days later. He will not know that around 1300 BC, perhaps within his own lifetime, the city he is walking into will shake apart in an earthquake. The walls will crack. The people will rebuild on the ruins, smaller, denser, with grain pits sunk into the floors of houses. Archaeologists will call the new city Troy 7A. That is the city that will burn. A young man is crouched behind the eastern wall of the citadel at dusk. He is perhaps 19, perhaps 20. He has a sling in his right hand. At his feet, a pile of polished stone shot, the right weight for the sling, ready and never used. Behind him, inside the citadel, the storerooms are burning. He can hear the cracking of beams. He does not turn to look because he is watching the gate. The sun has just gone down behind the plain to the west, and the smoke is going up red against the last of the sky. The houses around him have large clay storage vessels, pithoi, sunk into the floors, big enough to hold a family's grain for a year. Someone had been expecting a siege. The pits in the floors are full. He does not speak. None of the men along the wall speak. They listen. Somewhere down the slope, beyond the lower town, men are moving toward the gate. He hears them through the soles of his feet before he hears them with his ears. This is around 1180 BC. The wider world is coming apart at the same time. The great king in the east, in the Hittite capital of Hattusa, has just abandoned his city. The palaces of the Mycenaean Greeks across the sea are burning one by one. The trading system that connected all of these places is collapsing within a single generation. The young man does not know the word for any of this. He knows the gate, the wall, the weight of the stone in his sling, the men beside him. The arrow comes from outside. He sees the spark of it before he hears it. It hits a roof beam above the burning storeroom and lodges there, already lit. What happens next, archaeologists will reconstruct from the ground itself. Layers of ash across the citadel. Slingstones in piles, untouched. A city taken by violence and not afterward reoccupied at the same scale. The men along the wall do not survive the night. The city does. Smaller, poorer. People come back, or new people arrive, and rebuild on the ruins. Troy 7B, the archaeologists will call it. It will last another 2 centuries before it too is abandoned. But the memory of this evening will not be abandoned. It will be carried out by the survivors and by their children, and by the singers their children will pay to remember. An old man stands in the middle of a hall on a low island somewhere east of the Greek mainland, around 800 BC. The hall is lit by a single olive oil lamp on a tripod. The guests are reclining on couches along the walls with wine cups in their hands. He has been hired for the evening. The host is a wealthy landowner whose grandfather fought somewhere. This is what he sings for this evening. In his hands, a forminx, a 4-stringed lyre, light against his shoulder. He plucks once to set the pitch and begins. The lines come out in hexameters, 6 beats to the line, the meter as old as the songs themselves. He does not compose them in the moment. He recombines them. Across his memory lies a vast network of fixed phrases: swift-footed Achilles, rosy-fingered Dawn, well-greaved Achaeans, horse-taming Trojans, that fit the meter at known positions in the line. He moves through them by feel. He can sing for hours without repeating himself, and never sing the same song twice the same way. This is what scholars in the 1930s, working among illiterate epic singers in the mountains of Yugoslavia, will finally understand: that an oral tradition does not memorize. It generates. The fixed phrases are the bones. The singer puts flesh on them differently each night. He is an Aoidos, a singer-poet. 300 or 400 years before this evening, the city on the hill above the Hellespont burned. The men who escaped carried the story west into the Greek islands. The story passed to their children, and from their children to other singers who shaped it into the meter, who fit it into the phrases, who sang it at feasts like this one. Some of what he sings tonight is invention. Some is older than his grandfather's grandfather. The names of the heroes have shifted. The geography has drifted. The walls in the song are higher than the walls were, but the wind is still from the north. The Trojans are still horse tamers. The city is still on the plain by the strait. He finishes near midnight. The host pays him. He sleeps in a guest room. In the morning, he will move on. He does not know that what he carries in his memory will, within his great-grandchildren's lifetime, be written down. Pause for a moment. We have moved from the Bronze Age city on the hill, destroyed around 1180 BC, to the singers who carried its memory across the dark centuries that followed. Around 750 BC, that memory will be written down by, or under the name of, a poet called Homer. We will reach him in the next chapter. But the structure of what follows needs flagging now. For the next 400 years after Homer, the city of the poem will be visited, honored, and recognized as a real place by Greeks and Romans alike. Alexander the Great will land on its shore in 334 BC. Roman emperors will trace their lineage to it. Then, in the early Middle Ages, the precise location of the hill will be lost, not forgotten as a story, but forgotten as a place on a map. It will stay lost for 1,400 years. When it is found again, it will be found by two men who never agreed on who found it first. A British diplomat will identify the hill. A German businessman will arrive 5 years later, take credit, and become famous. They will work together, fall out, and write themselves into opposing versions of the same story. The man with the knife is coming. So is the trench. So is the gold. Keep the hill in mind. We will be back. A man dictates in a small room somewhere in western Anatolia around 730 BC. He may be old. He may be blind. He may not exist in the singular at all. What we can say is this: an evening like this one, repeated over weeks, produced the poem we still read. A younger man sits on a stool opposite him with a sheet of papyrus on his lap, a reed pen, and a small bowl of ink made from soot and gum. The alphabet he is using has arrived in the Greek world within the last 100 years, adapted from a Phoenician script by merchants on the islands. It is the first time Greek can be written down at all. The older man begins, Menin Aied Thea Peleia Deo Achilleos. Sing, goddess, the rage of Peleus' son, Achilles. The line takes the meter of every line his teachers and his teachers' teachers used. The opening word, menis, rage, sets what the poem is about. Not the war for the city, not the fall of the walls. A quarrel inside the Greek camp in the 10th year of a siege between a king and his greatest warrior. The poem will run more than 15,000 lines, and it will cover roughly 50 days. What gets written down over the weeks that follow is the Iliad. We do not know who the older man was. We do not know if he existed as one person or as a name later attached to a tradition. Scholars call this the Homeric question, and they have been arguing about it for 2.5 centuries. What we do know is what the text contains. Names of places in western Anatolia that match Hittite diplomatic records from 500 years before the poem was written down. Bronze Age armor, boar's tusk helmets, tower shields that had gone out of use long before any singer alive in 730 BC could have seen one. Catalogs of ships from kingdoms that had collapsed centuries earlier. The poem remembers a world its own author could not have known firsthand. It also remembers things that never happened the way it tells them. The walls are higher than the walls were. The siege is longer. The gods are everywhere. 3,000 years of readers have argued about how to separate the layers. What the dictation produces by the end of those weeks is not a transcript of an oral performance. It is something new, an oral tradition fixed in writing for the first time by a poet, or by poets, operating at the seam between two worlds. The papyrus will be copied. The copies will be copied. The poem will outlive the room, the lamp, the dictator, the scribe, the city they are sitting in. In May of 334 BC, a young man steps off a ship at the southern shore of the Hellespont. He is 22 years old. His name is Alexander. He has just crossed from Europe with 35,000 soldiers, and he is at the beginning of a campaign that will not end until he is dead, 11 years from now, in Babylon. His first stop is not military. Before he marches inland to meet the army of the Persian king, he walks the short distance up to the hill at Hisarlık. The city on the hill is called Ilion now. It is small, a few thousand people, a market, a temple to Athena. It has been continuously inhabited for centuries. Everyone in the Greek world knows what it is. Everyone knows that this is the place where the war in the poem happened. Alexander has been carrying a copy of the Iliad with him since boyhood. His tutor, Aristotle, prepared an edition for him. He sleeps with it under his pillow. He believes, and his mother has told him this since he was small, that he is descended from Achilles on her side. At the temple of Athena, he dedicates his own armor and takes down, in exchange, a set of weapons that the temple priests have kept on display for as long as anyone remembers. They tell him the weapons belong to Achilles. Whether the weapons are actually Bronze Age is a question no one in 334 BC has the means to ask. The shield is bronze. The spear is bronze. That is enough. He carries the shield in front of him in every battle for the rest of his campaign. When he is wounded, his bodyguards hold it over him. Arrian, writing 500 years later, but drawing on contemporary sources, records what Alexander said standing in the temple that afternoon. He said that Achilles had been fortunate in finding Homer to immortalize his deeds. He himself, Alexander said, had no such poet. He did not yet. He would later. What matters for us is simpler. In May of 334 BC, the most powerful young man in the Greek world walked up a hill on the Anatolian coast and did not, for one moment, doubt that he was walking where Achilles had walked. Neither did the priests, neither did the soldiers behind him. 300 years later, Julius Caesar will stop at the same hill on his way east. Augustus will trace the founding of Rome itself to a Trojan refugee named Aeneas. For the entire span of classical antiquity, no one in the Mediterranean world questions that there was a real Troy on this real hill. The doubting will come much later. It will come from inside Europe itself. A man sits at a desk in a cold room in the city of Halle, in eastern Germany, on a morning in 1795. He is 36 years old. His name is Friedrich August Wolff. He is a professor of classical philology, and he is finishing a book in Latin that will, within 10 years, have changed how educated Europe reads the Iliad. The fire is not lit. He does not light it until mid-morning to save wood. His fingers are stiff. In front of him on the desk are 3 manuscripts of the Iliad, copied by Byzantine scribes, marginal notes from the Library of Venice, editions by ancient Alexandrian editors named Aristarchus and Zenodotus, and the pages of his own argument. The argument is this: the Iliad we have inherited is not the work of a single poet. It is a layered text, full of internal inconsistencies, formulaic repetitions, and seams visible to a trained eye. It is the product of centuries of oral composition by many singers, written down only later, perhaps not until the time of the Athenian tyrant Pisistratus in the 6th century BC, and edited into the shape we have by later hands. Wolff is careful. He does not, in the Prolegomena ad Homerem, say that the Iliad contains no history. That is not his subject. But the implication of his argument, when it spreads across European universities in the years after publication, is hard to contain. If there was no single Homer, if the poem is a stitched-together compilation, then perhaps the city in the poem is stitched together as well. Perhaps it is a composite of many places, or of no place. By the second half of the 19th century, the educated consensus across Germany, France, and Britain has settled. The Iliad is literature. It may preserve folk memory in the loosest sense. The geography is imaginary. There is no Troy. A minority disagrees. In Edinburgh, in 1822, a Scottish editor named Charles Maclaren publishes a dissertation arguing that the plain by the Hellespont contains the city Homer described, and that the hill at Hisarlık is the most likely candidate. Almost no one reads him. That same year, in a small village in Mecklenburg in northern Germany, a Lutheran pastor's son is born. He is named Johann Ludwig Heinrich Julius Schliemann. He will spend the first 40 years of his life nowhere near a university. When he eventually arrives at one, in his middle 40s, the doubt he has to argue against will already be a century old. A man stands at a table in his study in Çanakkale, on the Asian shore of the Dardanelles, on an afternoon in 1865. He is 37 years old. His name is Frank Calvert. He is the consular agent for both Britain and the United States in this small port town, which the locals also call Çanak. On the table in front of him, pottery sherds sorted by stratum, each one numbered in his own hand. A topographic map of the Trode, the plain of Troy, pinned to the wall. A field notebook open to a page of measurements taken on the southwest slope of a hill 20 kilometers inland. The hill is called Hisarlık. It means place of the fortress in Turkish. He has been on this coast for almost 2 decades. His family has been here since 1822, the same year, by coincidence, that Schliemann was born and Maclaren published. His older brother Frederick bought a large estate in 1847 that included half of the hill at Hisarlık. The other half belongs to the Ottoman government. Frank has been digging small exploratory trenches on the family's half for years, quietly, without funding. He has read Maclaren. He has read Strabo and Pliny. He has walked the plain in every season. He has compared the geography in the Iliad to the geography he can see from his own roof on a clear day when the wind allows. What he holds in his hand this afternoon is a fragment of imported Mycenaean pottery. He has just identified it as such. He knows what it means. Mycenaean pottery in this stratum means a late Bronze Age trading city on this hill, contemporary with Mycenae across the sea. Contemporary, in other words, with the world the Iliad remembers. He has the knowledge. He has the language. Turkish, Greek, French, English. He has the property rights to half the hill. He has the patience, the discipline, the cross-references. What he does not have is money. A proper excavation of Hisarlık would cost more than his consular salary would generate in a lifetime. He has written to the British Museum. He has written to interested parties in London. The replies have been polite and non-committal. There is, in 1865, no institutional appetite in Britain for funding a dig on a hill that the consensus of European scholarship says cannot possibly be Troy. So he keeps the sherds, the notes, the maps. He waits. He does not yet know that within 3 years, a wealthy German amateur will sail into the harbor below his house, knock on his door, and ask him for help. He does not yet know that the same German will, 20 years later, write a book about the discovery of Troy, in which Frank Calvert's name appears only in passing. A short, dark-bearded man in his middle 40s steps off a steamer at the small port of Çanakkale on a hot afternoon in August of 1868. His name is Heinrich Schliemann. He is 46 years old. He has been studying classical philology at the Sorbonne for the past 2 years. He has retired from business. He has divorced his Russian wife in a court that almost no one recognizes. He has come to the Dardanelles to see Troy with his own eyes. He believes, on the basis of his own reading of the Greek geographer Strabo, that Troy is most likely a hill called Bunarbashi, several kilometers south of the plain. He intends to spend the next few days walking that hill. A British consular agent meets him at the dock. The agent is 40 years old, taller than Schliemann, soft-spoken, plainly dressed. His name is Frank Calvert. Calvert takes him home. Over the next 2 evenings, in the study where the labeled sherds and the topographic maps are still on the table, he walks Schliemann through 15 years of work. He shows him the imported Mycenaean pottery. He shows him the stratigraphy. He shows him the cross-references in Strabo and Pliny that Schliemann has missed. He explains patiently why Bunarbashi is too far inland, too high, too small, and stratigraphically too thin to be the city of the Iliad. Then he tells him where the real candidate is. On the 3rd morning, they ride out together to Hisarlık. Schliemann climbs the hill. He stands at the southwest corner of the summit. From there, on a clear day, you can see the strait opening to the north and the plain falling away to the west, exactly as the poem describes. The wind comes up from the north. He holds a fragment of Calvert's pottery in his right hand. He changes his mind. What happens next will define both of their lives. Calvert proposes a partnership. He owns half the hill outright. He has the local knowledge, the language, the trust of the Ottoman authorities. He needs funding. Schliemann has the funding. He has more money than Calvert has ever seen. A fortune built from indigo trading in St. Petersburg, gold trading in Sacramento, and military supply contracts during the Crimean War. They agree, informally, to work together. Within a year, Schliemann will marry a 17-year-old Greek girl named Sophia Engastromenou in Athens. Within 2 years, he will be cutting trenches at Hisarlık. Within 5 years, he will be famous across Europe. In the books he will publish about the discovery of Troy, Frank Calvert will appear briefly in the third person as a helpful local. The hill will be Schliemann's hill. The discovery will be Schliemann's discovery. The mistake about Bunarbashi, the mistake Calvert corrected in 2 evenings of patient teaching, will not appear at all. A man stands behind the counter of a small bank in Sacramento, California, on a spring morning in 1851. He is 29 years old. In his right hand, a brass precision scale. In front of him on the counter, a leather pouch of gold dust poured out by a miner who has just come down from the foothills. His name is Heinrich Schliemann. His brother Ludwig died in these gold fields a few months ago, and Heinrich crossed the Atlantic and the continent to claim the inheritance. Instead of going home with it, he opened a bank. In 6 months, more than $1 million in gold dust will pass across this counter. His life before this morning has been improbable. He was born in 1822 in a Lutheran parsonage in Mecklenburg in northern Germany. His mother died when he was 9. His father lost his position over a financial scandal. Schliemann was pulled out of school at 14 and apprenticed to a grocer. At 19, he signed onto a ship for South America, was wrecked on the Dutch coast, and washed up penniless in Amsterdam. He started over. He worked as a bookkeeper. He taught himself languages, Dutch first, then English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian. He moved to St. Petersburg in 1846 as an agent for a Dutch trading firm, added Russian to his languages, and began trading on his own account in indigo, coffee, and saltpeter. The Crimean War in the mid-1850s made him very rich. He supplied the Russian army. By 1864, he is 42 years old and worth several $1 million in today's terms. He retires. He has spent his entire adult life making money. He has spent none of it on what he tells himself he actually loves: Greek poetry, ancient history, the world of Homer he first read about as a child. So he goes to Paris. He enrolls at the Sorbonne. He studies classical philology for 2 years alongside students half his age, and he writes lecture notes in 15 languages. He learns Greek properly. He learns Latin properly. He reads the Iliad in the original, slowly, line by line, with his own annotations in the margins. In August of 1868, he gets on a ship for the Dardanelles. He is 46 years old. He has never excavated anything. He has no formal training in archaeology, a discipline that, in 1868, barely exists. He has money, languages, ambition, and the conviction that the city in the poem is a real place that he can find. He is about to meet Frank Calvert, but by the time Calvert finishes correcting him about Bunarbashi, Schliemann will have already decided in his own mind that he found Troy. A young woman kneels at the edge of a small trench at Pasha Tepe, a low burial mound a few kilometers from Hisarlık, on an afternoon in April of 1872. She is 20 years old. She is wearing a plain field dress and a white kerchief against the sun. In her left hand, a notebook. In her right, a pencil. Her name is Sophia Schliemann, born Engastromanu. She has been married to Heinrich for 2.5 years. Her family in Athens is wealthy and respected. Her father is a banker, the largest individual shareholder in the Pennsylvania Railroad. She was educated at the Arsakaion School. She recited Homer in ancient Greek as a teenager. Her uncle Theokletos, a bishop, selected her for Schliemann from a set of photographs the older man had sent. She is supervising 4 Turkish workmen. Her instructions are slower and more careful than her husband's. She wants the soil sifted. She wants finds bagged by depth. Schliemann himself, 20 kilometers away at Hisarlık, is cutting a 40-meter trench straight down through the hill at a speed that is already destroying Bronze Age walls. Sophia is at Pasha Tepe because he sent her here. In a letter to her father later that spring, he will write, "I enclose also my 9th report," or rather Sophia's report, since she co-wrote it, and all of the ideas are hers. This is not flattery. She is a working partner in the campaigns. 4 years from now, in 1876, she will personally extract objects from the shaft graves of Mycenae. Her name will appear on excavation reports. She will be photographed in jewelry from these digs. But there is something else happening this spring, far from Pasha Tepe, that the dig has not yet noticed. In Athens, her father is ill. Georgios Engastromenous is 63 years old. He is the anchor of her family. By the early spring of 1873, he will be failing rapidly. In the first week of May, he will die. Sophia will leave Hisarlık immediately and sail back to Athens for the funeral. Schliemann will write in his diary on May 7th, "Heute reiste Sophie wieder ab." Today, Sophie left again. A week later, he will write to the German archaeologist Adolf Konze, "My wife has returned to Athens because of the sudden death of her father. She will not be back in Hisarlık before the end of the month. She will not be there on the morning of May 31st. A woman sits at a wooden desk in Providence, Rhode Island, on a morning in early 1998. She is in her mid-40s. Her name is Susan Hook Allen. She teaches classics at Brown University. On the desk in front of her, a stack of unpublished letters by Frank Calvert that she has tracked down through archives in Britain, Turkey, and the United States over the past 8 years. The book she is finishing will be called Finding the Walls of Troy. The opening line is already written. By long tradition, the name most commonly linked with the discovery of ancient Troy has been Schliemann. There is another claim to be staked. Behind her, on the wall, a plan of Schliemann's excavation. Beside the plan, a small black and white photograph of Calvert in middle age, a man no one recognizes by face. Between Schliemann's death and her mourning at the desk lie 108 years. The work of correcting what Schliemann did and of carrying the thread he carried so carelessly has passed through many hands. Schliemann himself died on December 26, 1890, in a hotel room in Naples. He had collapsed the day before in a public square. An infection in his ear had spread to his brain. He was 68. His body was carried to Athens. He was buried in January in a mausoleum designed for him by Ernst Ziller, built in the shape of a small Greek temple. The inscription, which Schliemann composed in his own lifetime, reads, "To the hero Schliemann." Sophia lived another 42 years. She funded the continuation of the dig. She edited her husband's autobiography for posthumous publication, and she never publicly corrected its inventions, including the inventions about herself. She died in 1932. The man Schliemann hired in 1882 as his architect, Wilhelm Dürpfeld, introduced systematic stratigraphy and finally established the numbering of the 9 cities of the hill, the numbering still used today. Carl Blegen of Cincinnati, excavating from 1932 to 1938, identified Troy 7A as the layer destroyed by violence around 1180 BC, the strongest candidate for the city of the poem. Manfred Korfmann of Tübingen, working from 1988 to 2005, used ground-penetrating radar to reveal that the lower town of Troy 6 was 10 times larger than anyone had guessed. Allen, in 1998, completes the chain. She restores Frank Calvert to the record. The book will be published the following year by the University of California Press. The treasure Schliemann pulled from the trench in 1873 is, in 1998, in storage at the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, where the Red Army deposited it as war booty in 1945. Smaller fragments are in Istanbul. The diadem Sophia wore for the photograph has not been displayed publicly in 50 years. The hill at Hisarlık is open to visitors. Saturday, May 31st, 1873. 8 o'clock in the morning, the trench at the southwest corner of the hill at Hisarlık is already 4 meters deep. Around it, on the open ground above, roughly 150 Turkish workmen are scattered across the dig, swinging picks and shifting baskets of earth. Heinrich Schliemann stands on the rim of the trench. He is 51 years old. The cuff of his white sleeve is stained brown to the elbow with dust. In his hand, a leather-bound field notebook, open to a blank page. The sun is climbing. The day will be hot. Below him, against the inner face of a thick masonry wall, a wall he has named the Wall of Priam, and which the archaeologists who come after him will identify as the outer fortification of Troy II, almost 2,000 years older. A workman's pick strikes something that does not sound like stone. The man stops. He calls up. Schliemann goes down into the trench. What he sees, embedded in the earth wall, is a glint of metal. The history of the next 10 minutes is the history of the next 100 years of archaeology. He calls Pydos, the lunch break. He sends all the workmen up out of the trench and away from the site. He goes back down alone. In his hand now is a large knife. With Sophia in Athens, with no one else watching, he begins to cut the find out of the wall of earth. What he removes, across the rest of the morning, is approximately 8,700 objects. 2 large gold diadems made of thousands of small linked leaves, a pair of earrings with hanging baskets, necklaces, silver and bronze vessels, weapons, cups. He believes he has found the personal treasure of King Priam, the last king of Troy. The treasure is real. It is one of the most important caches of early Bronze Age gold work ever recovered. The dating, when archaeologists are finally able to do it properly, will be roughly 2,400 BC, more than 1,000 years before any king named Priam, if such a king existed, could have lived. The same afternoon, Schliemann packs the gold into bags and arranges to smuggle it off Ottoman territory by ship to Athens. In the book he publishes the following year, he writes, "It would have been impossible for me to have removed the treasure without the help of my dear wife, who stood by me ready to pack the things which I cut out." Sophia, on the morning of May 31st, is in Athens. In December of the same year, in a private letter to Charles Newton at the British Museum, Schliemann will admit he put her into the published scene because the story read better with her in it. Later that year, or the next, he will photograph her in the diadem. The image will travel the world. The city under the hill at Hisarlık was real. It was destroyed by violence around 1180 BC. Its memory was carried across 4 dark centuries by singers who shaped it into hexameters and fixed phrases. Horse-taming Trojans, well-greaved Achaeans, the wine-dark sea. The memory was written down around 730 BC by a poet or several poets we call Homer. It was visited by Alexander in 334 BC and by Roman emperors after him. It was lost as a place on the map sometime in the early Middle Ages. It was questioned as ever having existed by European philology in 1795. It was identified again by Charles McLaren in 1822 and by Frank Calvert in the 1860s. It was excavated destructively but successfully by Heinrich Schliemann between 1870 and 1873. The honest question about Schliemann is whether he was a visionary or a destroyer. The honest answer is that he was both, and that the attempt to choose one betrays the material. He was a visionary in trusting the Iliad as a map when the academic world had decided it was only literature. He was a destroyer in cutting straight down through the layers of the hill, ruining the very Bronze Age strata, Troy 6 and 7a, that were most likely the city of the poem. He was a self-promoter in erasing Frank Calvert from his published account. He was dishonest in inserting Sophia into the morning of the discovery. He was wrong about who made the gold he found by approximately 1,000 years. And the city existed. The poem held memory. He had dug in the right place. The thread of Troy passed through Bronze Age survivors, through Greek singers in Dark Age halls, through a poet named Homer, through Hellenistic copyists and Roman emperors and Byzantine monks, through Renaissance humanists, through Charles McLaren in Edinburgh, through Frank Calvert in Çanakkale, through Heinrich Schliemann in his trench, through Wilhelm Dürpfeld and Karl Blegen and Manfred Korfmann and Susan Hoyk Allen. Each held it differently. Each held it imperfectly. Schliemann was the loudest and the most flawed. Calvert was the quietest and the best informed. Allen put both of them back in their proper places in the record. Carrying a thread does not mean carrying it well. It means not dropping it. The trench at Hisarlık is still visible today. From its rim, at dusk, you can look down through the exposed sections of the 9 cities, ring after ring, like the cross-section of a felled tree. 14 centuries of human settlement compressed into a few meters of earth. Near the bottom, the layer of Troy II, where the gold was cut from the wall and the evidence around it was lost in the same gesture. The thread held. It held barely and through hands that did not always deserve it, but it held. This was the 34th video of this channel and the last for some time. Arc 8 brought together 3 figures who saw what others did not. Antonio Onofri at San Marino, who saw institutional survival, where Napoleon and Europe saw vassalage. Johann Burckhardt at Petra, who saw a city where Europe saw only desert obscurity. Heinrich Schliemann at Hisarlık, who saw a real place where the academic world saw only poetry. 3 different ways of trusting sources that others had dismissed. 3 different costs. The channel is going into a planned pause, not an ending to preparation. Time to study what 34 videos have taught us. Time to choose the next arc carefully. Time to keep building what is being built here. Subscribe so that you are still here when the next civilization is ready. Every empire ends. The thread does not. Witness the next civilization.